Life in the suburbs seemed flawless to anyone looking in. A spacious house with a landscaped yard, a shimmering pool under the sun. A hard-working husband and a 19-year-old son on the brink of graduating college. But behind closed doors, the perfection was a facade. My husband, Daniel, spent most of his time at work. And when he was home, his attention was fixed on his phone or the TV. The bond we once shared had faded over the years, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. It was a warm Saturday afternoon in early summer when I first noticed Caleb. He was my son Liam's best friend, a confident, polite young man who had been visiting for months. Until that day, I hadn't given him much thought. But something changed. Liam had invited Caleb over to swim in our backyard pool. From the kitchen, I caught a glimpse of them through the sliding glass door. Caleb stood at the pool's edge, water glistening on his skin under the bright sun. His lean, athletic build and smooth, sun-kissed complexion drew my eye. With effortless grace, he dove into the pool, emerging with a grin that revealed perfect white teeth. For a moment, I couldn't look away. It wasn't just his appearance. It was the way he carried himself, the quiet confidence he exuded. It was so unlike Daniel's distant and weary demeanor. A strange feeling stirred within me, something I hadn't felt in years. I quickly dismissed the thought and returned my focus to the dishes. But over the next few days, I found my mind drifting back to Caleb. No matter how much I tried to push it away, Caleb began spending more time at our house. He and Liam worked out together in the garage, played video games late into the night, and often lounged by the pool. Each time Caleb was around, I found myself acutely aware of his presence. One afternoon, while Liam ran to the store, Caleb came inside for a drink. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "Mrs. Hart, do you mind if I grab some water?" Caleb asked, his deep voice breaking my concentration. "Of course, Caleb," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. "And please call me Claire." He flashed that easy, disarming smile. "Thanks, Claire." As he reached for a glass, our hands brushed. It was a fleeting moment, but it sent a jolt through me. I quickly pulled my hand back, hoping he hadn't noticed the way my breath hitched. "Sorry about that," he said with a soft chuckle. "It's fine," I murmured, my cheeks burning as I turned back to the counter. After he left the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, my heart racing. What was happening to me? I was a married woman in my 40s. Yet here I was, blushing like a schoolgirl over someone half my age. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone by the pool. The water shimmered under the moonlight, its gentle ripples reflecting the turmoil in my heart. I couldn't deny it anymore. There was something about Caleb that drew me in, something I couldn't explain or control. I told myself it was just a harmless crush, a passing infatuation that would fade with time. But deep down, I knew better. The way he looked at me earlier, it wasn't just in my imagination. There was something unspoken between us, a spark that couldn't be ignored. As the night wore on, I made a promise to myself. I would push these feelings aside. I was a wife, a mother, and I had a family to protect. But even as I resolved to bury my emotions, a part of me couldn't help but wonder, what if? I tried to ignore my feelings, burying them under the routine of daily life. But Caleb made it impossible. His presence seemed to fill every corner of my home, his laughter echoing through the walls, his scent lingering long after he'd left a room. A week after that night by the pool, everything changed. Liam and Caleb were playing basketball in the driveway, their shirts tossed aside in the summer heat. I had opened the living room window to let in some air, and their playful banter drifted inside. I tried to focus on folding laundry, but my eyes kept wandering to Caleb. When they finished playing, Liam ran inside to grab something from his room, leaving Caleb alone on the porch with a bottle of water. He caught me watching through the window and smiled. But it wasn't just a casual smile. It was knowing, as if he could see right through me. My heart raced, and I quickly looked away, pretending to be engrossed in folding clothes. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Caleb's voice startled me. He was leaning casually against the window frame, his dark eyes glinting in the afternoon light. "Yes, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You should come outside more, Claire. Get some sun," he said, his tone light but carrying an undercurrent I couldn't quite place. "I'm fine right here, but thank you," I said, forcing a polite smile before turning away. Still, his words lingered. It wasn't just a suggestion, it was the way he said it, like a challenge. Later that evening, I stood alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. Caleb walked in, his footsteps soft on the tile. "Need any help?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. "No, I've got it," I replied, avoiding his gaze. But he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter, his eyes fixed on me. "You work too hard, you know that?" I paused, a plate forgotten in my hand. No one had said anything like that to me in years. "It's just what I do," I said with a small shrug. "Well, maybe someone should take care of you for a change," he said, his gaze unwavering. My breath caught. There it was again, that spark, that tension humming between us. I knew I should walk away, say something to break the moment, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in his gaze like a moth to a flame. Before I could respond, Liam walked into the room, breaking the spell. Caleb straightened, his easy smile returning. "Thanks for dinner, Mrs. Hart," he said, before walking out with Liam. But his words lingered, heavier than I wanted to admit. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and fleeting touches. Once, in the kitchen, our hands brushed again. And this time, neither of us pulled away immediately. Another time, as I passed him in the hallway, his arm grazed mine, sending a shiver down my spine. I knew this was dangerous. I was walking a fine line, and one wrong step could destroy everything. But the more I tried to resist, the more I found myself drawn to him. One afternoon, while Liam was out running errands, Caleb stayed behind. I was sitting on the patio, sipping iced tea, when he joined me. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Of course not," I replied, keeping my tone casual. For a while we sat in silence, the chirping of birds and the distant hum of traffic filling the air. Then he turned to me. "You seem different lately. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Just a lot on my mind," I said finally. "If there's anything I can do." His voice trailed off, but the meaning was clear. I looked at him, really looked at him, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was longing, a desperate need to feel alive again. The moment I gave in felt inevitable, no matter how much I'd tried to convince myself otherwise. It was a humid Friday evening. Daniel and Liam had gone to a baseball game in the city, leaving the house unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your thoughts wander into dangerous places. Caleb had stayed behind, saying he wasn't a fan of baseball. I didn't question it. A part of me was relieved he stayed. A part of me was terrified. I sat on the couch with a book, though I couldn't focus on a single page. Caleb appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, holding a glass of water. "Of course," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He sat beside me, closer than he ever had before. The air between us felt electric, charged with the tension we'd been dancing around for weeks. "You seem nervous," he said softly after a moment. "I'm fine," I lied, though my hands trembled slightly as I turned a page in my book. He reached out, gently taking the book from my hands and placing it on the coffee table. "Claire, you don't have to pretend with me." Hearing him say my name like that, without pretense, without formality, sent a shiver through me. I turned to face him, my resolve crumbling under the weight of his gaze. "I can't," I started, but the words caught in my throat. "You can," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I know you feel it too." And in that moment, I stopped thinking. I stopped worrying about right and wrong, about the consequences that would inevitably come crashing down. I leaned in, and Caleb met me halfway. When our lips touched, it was as if a dam had burst, weeks of suppressed desire pouring out and consuming us both. His hands were strong yet tender as they cupped my face, pulling me closer. I melted into him, forgetting everything except the way he made me feel. The hours that followed were a haze of passion and guilt. We moved from the couch to the bedroom, a room where I had spent countless lonely nights, wondering if Daniel even noticed me anymore. Now, someone did. But as the night stretched on, reality crept back in. I lay beside Caleb, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. "This can't happen again," I whispered, though even as I said the words, I didn't believe them. "I don't think you mean that," Caleb replied, his voice calm and self-assured. I turned to face him, searching his expression for any hint of doubt or hesitation. There was none. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "You deserve to feel this way, Claire. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." His words soothed something raw inside me, but they couldn't erase the guilt already taking root. Over the next few weeks, our secret affair continued. We stole moments whenever we could. When Liam was out, when Daniel worked late. The thrill of sneaking around heightened the intensity, but it also left me paranoid. One afternoon, as we sat together on the patio, Caleb reached for my hand. I pulled away quickly, glancing nervously toward the house. "Relax," he said with a smirk. "No one's home. That's not the point," I whispered, my eyes darting to the windows. But it wasn't just the fear of being caught that gnawed at me. Every time we were together, I felt myself slipping further away from the person I used to be. The first crack in our secret came one evening when Daniel found Caleb's hoodie draped over a dining chair. "Did Caleb leave this here?" he asked casually. "Yes," I replied quickly, my heart pounding. "He must have forgotten it after dinner." Daniel raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Still, the encounter left me shaken. How long before he started asking more questions? The answer came sooner than I expected. It was a warm Sunday afternoon, and the house buzzed with the usual noise, Liam and Caleb laughing in the backyard, Daniel flipping channels in the living room, and me pretending everything was fine as I set the table for dinner. But everything wasn't fine. I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and the weight of my secret was crushing me. Every time I looked at Daniel, guilt twisted in my stomach like a knife. Every time I saw Liam, I felt like the worst mother in the world. Through the kitchen window, Caleb caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing smile. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly looked away. I had to end this. I had to stop before everything came crashing down. But fate had other plans. That evening, Daniel stepped outside to take a phone call, and Liam was upstairs showering after their swim. Caleb and I were alone in the kitchen, the tension between us thick enough to cut with a knife. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, my voice trembling. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. "You don't mean that." "I do," I insisted, though my resolve wavered as he looked at me. "This is wrong, Caleb. It has to stop." Before he could respond, the back door opened and Daniel walked in. For a moment, I thought we had composed ourselves, but then his eyes narrowed, flicking between Caleb and me. "What's going on here?" he asked sharply. "Nothing," I said quickly, my voice too high-pitched to be convincing. Daniel's gaze lingered on me, then shifted to Caleb. "Liam's friend or not, you better explain yourself, kid." Caleb hesitated, but before he could speak, Liam appeared in the doorway, his hair still damp from the shower. "What's going on?" Liam asked, looking between us. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Then to my horror, Daniel turned to Liam. "How well do you really know your friend, son?" "Dad, what are you talking about?" Liam asked, frowning. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes filled with suspicion and betrayal. "Claire, is there something you want to tell me?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The truth clawed its way to the surface, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. It was Caleb who finally broke the silence. "Mr. Hart, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Don't lie to me," Daniel roared, slamming his hand down on the counter. The room erupted into chaos. Liam demanded answers, Caleb tried to explain, and Daniel turned his fury on me. By the time the dust settled, the truth was out. Liam stormed out of the house, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Caleb left shortly after, his usual confidence replaced by shame. Daniel and I were left alone in the kitchen, the silence deafening. "How long?" he asked finally, his voice hollow. I couldn't meet his eyes. "A few weeks," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. He laughed bitterly, running a hand through his hair. "A few weeks? With our son's best friend? God, Claire, what were you thinking?" "I wasn't," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I was lonely, Daniel. You've been so distant and Don't you dare blame this on me," he snapped. "You made this choice, not me." He stormed out, leaving me alone with my guilt and regret. The aftermath was a nightmare. Liam refused to speak to me, and Daniel moved into the guest room. The house felt like a war zone, every interaction charged with anger and hurt. Caleb stopped coming around, and I couldn't blame him. His friendship with Liam was over, and my family was in ruins. Months later, I'm still living with the consequences of my actions. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Daniel and I are in therapy now, though it's uncertain if our marriage will survive. Liam has started to forgive me, but our relationship will never be the same. As for Caleb, he's moved on. I saw him once at a coffee shop. We exchanged a brief, awkward glance before he turned and walked away. I've learned a hard lesson. A moment of weakness can shatter a lifetime of trust. Life is full of choices, and some of them can change everything in an instant. If you want more gripping, emotional stories like this one, make sure to like and subscribe. There's always another tale waiting to be told.